Hey there, everybody. Good morning. Um, I wanted to try to keep a little bit of momentum going for my practice. This is kind of a little bit of learning discipline for me, and so I am going to attempt to keep the momentum rolling as I learn things. One of the first things I learned was that I should raise the camera up. So, working on that. Um, and the sun is rising in the east right now, off to my right. My dog is sitting with me right now, hanging out, and Biz is off for a run. And after the video yesterday, we got to talking, and we were able to kind of break a couple things down. And I wanted to use this morning to talk a little bit more about dialectical spirituality and what in God's name is that. So, dialectical methodology is actually something that comes to us from an extremely boring philosopher. I have his book somewhere around here, The Phenomenology of Spirit. Hegel, Hegel, is his last name. But it's interesting to me because I came across dialectical methodology, after I had been studying Taoism for probably 10 or so years, maybe a little bit more at this point. But it was taught to me, I guess, by my teacher, as a spiritual truth, that was all about holding opposing truths, narratives, structures of reality as true at once. So, one of my apprenticeships, the first day that we met for training, my teacher had me sit and do a meditation. And I'll do it now for you as well, and you can do it with me if you like. So he had me sit and meditate and hold in my mind the idea that fate and predetermination and predestination was everything, right? Was true. And so, in this worldview, for those of you actually trying to do this meditation with me, everything that you've ever done, everything that you ever will do, everything that everyone does is all predetermined. It's all fate. None of us have any personal choice in the matter. We're just following along the actions. And take a second to think about that, right? I mean, that in and of itself is its own kind of mind fuck to really take in. Then he said, okay, enough. Now I want you to imagine a world and hold it as completely true inside your being, where nothing is predetermined. Everything is about choice. Everything is about you and your own will to act. And hold that as completely true inside your mind. And we discussed these two things, right? We discussed what did the energy feel like, if you tried to imagine what a path looked like in both of those places. What's the energy doing in a world where everything is fate and a world where everything is choice? What's it look like? What's it feel like to you? Does one of them give you a fucking panic attack? Both of those things are fine. Both of those things are fine. Then the final meditation, the third meditation, was, now I want you to hold them both as true simultaneously without counteracting or, without defeating the other. So I held that in my mind, and I attempted to make that true. And I'll let you take a moment just to let that settle and play in your mind. And so for me, that became this through line for all of my apprenticeships that has followed me now for a decade, at least a decade, that I've been really meditating on that particular thing. So now I'd like to give you another element that we can use to help us think about this. In quantum physics, we have this idea of point and wave duality or dichotomy or whatever we want to refer to it as. How can something be both particle and a wave at the same time? How can something be a particle and a wave at the same time? That, to me, brings us deeper into this meditation. This was my second kind of primary meditation or apprenticeship. Was really, really hyper focused on quantum physics and new physics and all of that sort of stuff and its implications on spirituality. And so we embrace this idea that we have to be able to be both particle and wave at the same time. And so in this way, we move deeper down the rabbit hole of what is reality? Is there a single truth? Or are there many truths that overlap? And so that image of the Vesica Pisces, the Venn diagram, as some people refer to it as, but the two overlapping circles with the space in the middle. The space in the middle is creation, is everything. It's where we generate something new. The new thesis to then be pushed at and questioned and interrogated by reality. And in this way, I believe, this is how evolution occurs. I believe this is how everything happens at its micro scale, is this the thing and its opposite. I, again, have had a very depersonalized part of this, or I guess a very depersonalized way of understanding this hard to wrap your head around truth. From the time I was a kid, in the form of Taoism and their beautifully depersonalized aspect of yin and yang, dark and light. Foolishly, we use the word good and evil when talking about yin and yang. One man's good is another man's evil. So it's no, one person's good is another person's evil. There's never very many judgment statements made. There's not a lot of attribution made. There's a lot of observation made. And all truth within a yin-yang model, within a dialectical model, is all relative truth, right? This is only left relative to right. This is only up relative to down. This is only forward relative to backward. We don't arrive at forward, backward, left, right, up, down until we understand that we are at the center. We are the nexus of our individual relative subjective experience. So this is, I'm going to move that just a little bit so that nobody gets blinded. We'll get a little more chicken, a little less sun. Okay, let's try that. This is our sign that says slow and our ridiculous chicken that is going to just be on stream with me for a while, I assume. So if we can imagine front and back, right? That line backward goes back all the way to the first human ancestor. This line forward goes forward all the way to our last human descendant. I am at the nexus point between front and back. I am the synthesis. I am the dialectical. Right? Dialectics is not something I'm creating. Harmony between yin and yang is not something I'm creating. It's something I am being. It's something I am holding in space by my relationship to them. Yin and yang, let's imagine yin and yang now maybe as something so much bigger that we can't possibly control them, right? These forces of, let's just use light and dark. When we look up at the night sky, there are little points of light and there's a vast sea of darkness. Those things are in a dance with each other. That light, that darkness dance with each other. I have no way to hold either of those things accountable. I have no way of owning them in a subjective way. All I can do is position myself relative to them in order to keep myself kind of relatively safe, relatively able to maintain my observation. Let's bring it down a little bit, right? A wave, like in the ocean wave. A wave is a relationship between the water going in and the water coming out, and how they relate to each other is what creates that wave. That wave, the upward part, right, has a zenith. The undercurrent has a nadir. As a human, I can be in two places, but I can be everywhere in between too, right? So a skillful surfer masters the dialectical of the wave and says, how do I ride this wave to get the most momentum to ride it to its natural conclusion? How do I take it to its end? I don't want to be at the bottom. And I probably don't even really want to be at the top, because the top's gonna collapse in on itself at some point. I want to be right in that sweet spot. And in the sweet spot, I'll be able to find my optimal placement. But it's skillfulness that allows me to find my optimal placement. So that was a big metaphor for me during my training. The wave is going to crash, baby. Just got to ride it. I just got to be in the right place to ride that mother right on in. And that's how we do all of this. So I'm going to use, those were all meant to be kind of examples. Some of them make sense to some people. Some of them make sense to other people. None of it really matters. Yell things at me in comments section. It doesn't, I don't care. All of them are just me trying to find the right way to explain it for people to understand. So I use this doctrine in my basic conception of energy anatomy, called the three centers doctrine. In a lot of ways, I take this from Chinese medical model, but there are Celtic, kind of equivalents, the three cauldrons, as they're referred to in some of the poetics of the Celtic peoples, the Druidic practices, all of that. But also within modern anatomy and physiology, right? They just make sense. One is the lower center, we can imagine it as the pelvic bowl and the abdominal cavity, creating that lower center. We can imagine it as the thoracic cavity, and the cardiac center is the middle center, and then the skull as this bowl, and the brain as this upper center. Right, so we can imagine those three. Right now, I get it over here too. This is the beautiful sun. I'm enjoying it immensely. This is the first day, actually, we haven't had horrific amounts of haze from wildfires, so I'm really grateful to see it in such its glory as we head toward the solstice. Yeah. So I imagine these three centers, and when I talk about them in the spiritual sense, right, I can talk about them from a physical sense in terms of how to move them, how to be aware of their anatomy and physiology. I can talk about them from their energetic sense of what is the energetic signature of the lower center, the middle center, and the upper center. But then there's this ineffable spiritual truth of the lower center, the middle center, and the upper center. And I call them the three gateways. Gateway of death, gateway of silence, and the gateway of annihilation. Pretty morbid stuff. Life is a little bit morbid on some level, right? We have to be able to embrace the morbidity and the joyousness. Anybody who's ever lived on a farm, I'm sure, can attest to this. So let's just start with this idea of the gateway of death, this lower center, my body center, my pelvic center, right? My lower center is also the center of reproduction. The lower center is also where I am able to give myself into history, into time. But it is also the place where I must embrace my own mortality, my own animal nature, that everything must eat to live, that something must die in order to be eaten. On the other side of this gate of death, as I refer to it, is this breakthrough, this knowledge of vitality, of life, of grateful embrace of existence. If I can embrace my own mortality and accept that I am a limited being, then I can truly embrace what it means to be alive. Those are not opposing truths. Death and life are not in opposition to one another. They are best friends with one another. They are in a dance, an inescapable, horrifying on some level, kind of, on an existential level, it's horrifying, right? In my deepest meditations as a child, when I started down the spiritual path, it all began from, as a young man, wanting someone desperately to talk to me about death, wanting desperately someone to talk to me about the fact that all of this seems somewhat pointless when placed next to that horrific truth that we are all going to die. The answer I got from everybody was deeply unacceptable. Just don't think about it. Just don't think about it. Okay, so don't think about the truth. Don't think about what's real. Think about anything you can do to distract yourself, was essentially the lesson I got. I found that, again, deeply unacceptable, deeply unsatisfactory. To a creative, inquisitive, curious mind, not good enough. Thank you. I'll go my own way on this one. So, walking through the gateway of death, we arrive at the truth of vitality, the vital essence of life. Is it just the fact that I can drink this cup of coffee and I can have a sensory experience? And if I, find a mate and they choose me, then I can have offspring. Is that all it really is? Or is this is there an essence underneath it that we really can kind of only hmm, that we can only allow into ourselves once we allow into ourselves our own mortality. And so this is where, because I was obsessed with martial arts, um, I got really into Zen. Zen was kind of my first entryway into Buddhism. So I wrote it from kind of anybody who understands the history and development of Buddhism. I wrote it from its end point essentially back to its beginning point. And the story of the Buddha as an origin story for me became very important, years down the line. The reason I got so into Zen was that there was this current, especially in Japanese Zen, because of the way that it was propagandized along with the samurai tradition, where it was all about this embrace of death, this embrace of personal ending, right? That you had an expiration date. So you had to embrace that. And Zen, for me, as a young man, curious about the nature of life, felt so refreshing because it was not interested in lying to me about what was happening to me. It was interested in saying, yeah, this sucks. You wanna deal with it, or you wanna lie to yourself about it? And I got really, really lucky. And so now here I am. And I'm meditating as an older man, and death gets closer and closer each day. And I meditate on the idea of my own mortality. And in that, I find a deeper appreciation for life. In my life, I appreciate more and more kind of the truth of how close death is at any given moment, right? I can see that through any number of truths and see that through any number of observations. But this dance of death and life is effectively what I am speaking to when I'm talking about the spiritual dialectic, that we move beyond one, we move beyond the other in their simple conceptions, and we spiral them up, and we move beyond the simple toward something that is much more holistically aware and inclusive of real truth, right? If I just say, well, everything's going to die, so who gives a shit? I'm embracing one side of the truth, but I'm allowing that to be the end of the argument. And we see that so often in our discourse as humans right now. And if I don't want to embrace death, I say, nope, that's not real. I'm just alive now. That's all that matters. I'm grateful. I'm enjoying it all. It's great. I blah 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 blah. I don't want to hear that. I'm embracing the other side of the argument. And I'm living in this beauty. I'm living in this joy, or I'm living in this morbidity. I'm living in this sort of acceptance, perhaps, of what is coming, or this denial of what is coming, or this acceptance of what is right now. Either way, both truths end up kind of, to anybody who's ever really spent any significant amount of time only embracing one or the other, will tell you the other side has this annoying way of constantly intruding on my bubble, right? If I have a bubble of truth, that other thing over there is just like, can you go away? And as hard as I try, as hard as we may try as humans, we cannot deny what's happening. We cannot deny what's real. We try. We try all the time. Think about the stock market, right? Think about the idea of perpetual growth, right? Nothing ever ends. Nothing ever goes down. We only go up here. Okay, well, that's going to get you only so far, isn't it? That's going to only bring you so deep into the mystery before you realize that you have a limited frame to be able to understand truth. So this path of I used all those initial examples to get me to this place, to be able to say that ultimately this isn't easy. This isn't easy work to do. I don't kind of lightly throw out there that we have to embrace hard truths in order to understand the whole truth. This is where my model for safety comes in, right? We only go so far down the road um, based purely on our own stability, right? If I'm having a hard time, I'm not going to meditate on death right now. I'm going to meditate on gratitude and vitality and life. But if I'm feeling a little bit prideful, I'm riding pretty high on the horse, and I'm feeling like the summer's never going to end. It's smart for me to meditate on winter because it brings me into this humble awareness of the impermanence, right? And another beautiful Buddhist concept that I was so lucky to get young, this idea that it's all gonna shift. It's all gonna change. And it's only in the shifting and the changing that the dance continues, right? If I just was standing still, I'm not gonna be dancing salsa. If I am just standing still, maybe that has its own truth. But it's not gonna be a beautiful dynamic embrace of joyful play. It's just gonna be, oh shit, well, here I am. Or, oh shit, here I am. Whatever it is, it's not going to be the other thing. So we have to be able to go back and forth. Some people would say it's the swing of the pendulum, this natural swing of the pendulum. But as I've been talking to more and more spiritual, mystics or whatever, we seem to be honing in on this idea that we actually want to slow this pendulum down. And rather than swinging wildly between extremes, the more we embrace these extremes, the more that we actually embrace the center. And the more that we're actually able to embrace a stillness, a quiet awareness. That because both truths are true, I don't need to wildly swing in reactionary embrace. Instead, I can just sit and I can see that the potential is there for me to swing. But really, what it is I can walk over there. I can be still. I can walk over there. I can be still. But none of it is from this kind of compulsion. I am not. I'm not compelled by anything outside of myself. Again, just like I said, the wave, the surfer is finding the dialectical. So if I want to ride the wave, I got to find the top, I got to find the bottom, and I got to position myself relative to it to take the whole thing on in. So that's just talking about one of the centers. I'm sure I'll talk more about it. I don't want to go too far over a half hour on these things. As I said, kind of doing my daily discipline of trying to get better at recording. But I hope all of that makes sense, and I look forward to kind of discussing maybe the other two centers, silence and annihilation, and my understanding of those things and the way that they all kind of play together one day. Hopefully, I'll get to as we talk about them individually. The idea that they all are in relationship to each other ends up becoming all the more important. So yeah, thanks if you've made it this far. I really appreciate it, and look forward to doing this again. And good morning. I hope you have a beautiful weekend and a beautiful day.